Hey, folks, welcome back to the Husker Big Red YouTube channel and another episode of the podcast. It's spring football here on Monday. The Cornhuskers are hitting the field today in the first spring workout under head coach Matt Rule. And today we're going to take a look at the offense. We'll talk a little bit of recruiting news and break down some of these things that are going on with spring practice. Danny, how you doing this morning?
I'm doing great. It seems so crazy that we're already talking about spring football. I'm certainly not complaining. I've missed football, and especially with all the hype this offseason and all the new faces, it's just exciting to see something on the field. I know spring football is not the be all end all, of course, but it's going to be fun to kind of just see all these new faces and see if we can get anything newsworthy out of spring ball, or if this is truly the dog and pony show that many think it is.
Yeah, I think it'll be an interesting time, as the depth chart kind of gets, sorted out. I put out a couple of different depth charts, offensive and defensive, on huskerbigred.com. And today we're going to kind of break down, the offense. There's a lot of things to talk about, a lot of position battles and things. Before we get into that, make sure, you guys, so you don't miss any of our future videos or podcasts, make sure you guys, hit the subscribe button to the Husker Big Red YouTube channel. Make sure you get into the comment section, hit the like button. Let us know what you think about spring football going forward. I guess we'll start with the quarterbacks though. Danny, we know Casey Thompson's going to be a little bit limited this spring. I'm not sure exactly what that means or how often he's going to throw. So it's a big opportunity for Jeff Sims to take
Hmm.
control of this quarterback job.
Yeah, and it's an opportunity for Jeff Sims to show, if he can fit in the offense or not, because, we're assuming that Casey Thompson will heal, fine and things like that. And I certainly hope he does, but it's always, you want to have that reassurance that if, forbid something goes wrong, that you have a solid backup, a solid number two, because we saw last year the need for a solid backup quarterback. And so, this is a really big spring, I think, for Jeff Sims to see, where he fits into this offense, and if he doesn't quite fit, I believe he has the athletic ability to kind of find a role in this offense, and so work on that if need be. And for what it's worth, he was training at 6 points in Jacksonville, I believe it was yesterday with Chuba Purdy. So it was good to see him kind of, we saw pictures on the Instagram account and we posted them on Facebook. It was good to see them kind of getting after it and trying to work hard.
Yeah, I think it's a big chance for Jeff Sims. I still, right now, I still think Casey Thompson, if has a good chance to win the starting job. But I think Jeff Sims has to throw the football and he has to show that he can be accurate down the field and take care of it. And that's been, he can run and do some of those other things. But Nebraska is still going to need a quarterback that's completing 60% of its passes. I mean, that's still, and Jeff Sims is, for his career has not done that. He's had a couple of down seasons. So I think that he, has a lot to prove as a passer. And then I'm also interested to see who could maybe emerge, as this number three quarterback. You've got Smothers, you've got Purdy, guys that potentially could transfer. So, that's what I'm kind of looking at this spring. And also, when is Casey Thompson, going to get on the field? Will he be ready at all for that spring game? My guess is probably not, but we'll see because I know he's not going to want to cede things to Jeff Sims either. So it'll be interesting to see if the coaching staff lets him, take part in practices at all.
That's a really good point because you're looking, at the spring game. In my opinion, is going to be more of a fight for the number two spot, and not even in the case of Jeff Sims, but guys like Purdy, Smothers, and then you know Harburg, Torres. Those guys. I think we have to see what the likes of Harburg and Torres can do, because I think it's very easy to bury them in the depth chart. But like you said last week, Matt Rule really likes Harburg, so I think this is a big spring for them too, because I mean the quarterback position, Matt Rule, at least early on, has not been afraid to go to the transfer portal, find Jeff Sims. Heck, even the program last year with Casey Thompson, we Nebraska has shown that they're not afraid to go after a quarterback in the transfer portal. So, I think this is big for Harburg and Torres and guys like that because quite honestly, just based off of production alone and what they've done at Nebraska, they can be easily replaced if need be.
Yeah, and yeah, that'll all be interesting things to follow this spring. I'm also, let's look forward to the running backs. I mean, it's a position where I feel like Nebraska's got two really good running backs in Anthony Allen and excuse me, AJ Allen and Anthony Grant. Got myself mixed up there for a minute, but Anthony Grant almost had 1,000 yards last season. Behind an offensive line that struggled and with an offensive coordinator that really wasn't committed to running the ball. So,
To put it
you know,
mildly.
yeah, and AJ Allen is, I want to see him be healthy again.
Yep.
I was glad to see him come back, but then
Yep.
also, some of the number three, what's going to happen with Ramir Johnson, Gabe Ervin, Emmett John, who's going to kind of emerge in that number three role? Because I do still think there's somebody that can get carries and play a pretty prominent role in this offense as a number three back.
I'm curious about Ramir Johnson because we heard, last summer even Mark Whipple say, "Oh, he's gonna have a fit in this offense," and then we never saw him. So I'm curious about Ramir for sure because I do think he's a good athlete, and I don't think he necessarily has to be a straight on running back. I think he can, be a receiver type of thing. I'm not saying he's gonna go, streak down the field every single play for a deep pass, but he does bring that speed and athleticism and flexibility. Emmett Johnson's, I'm not going to say forgotten about, but there's a lot of names in the room. And so, he's trying to, find his footing here too. And I mean, I believe he was the Minnesota Offensive Player of the Year in the high school ranks. So, I'm excited to see some of the smaller names or some of the names that we kind of have not heard as much kind of make their way. And, you mentioned AJ Allen. I'm obviously really excited to see him again. I'm glad that he's healthy and, recovering. And because, boy, I was very upset when his season got shortened with the injury last year. He was so exciting and so fun to watch. And I'm very glad he stayed. I mean, to me, that shows that Allen believes in what this staff is doing. And I'm always happy to have a hardworking, committed guy like that on the team because in today's world of college football, sometimes there aren't very many.
Yeah, and it will be interesting to see how the depth chart plays out. Getting AJ Allen back was a big win for the coaching staff. I'm wondering if Nebraska's going to lose a guy there to the transfer portal. Gabe Urban or Ramir Johnson. I'm not sure that they want to sit there and be Gabe Irvin especially to me is more of a he's not a guy that catches passes as much, so he could be a backup, but he's not like a great third down back. So he maybe could be a guy who could leave in the portal. But I would like to see Johnson get more opportunities. He averaged almost 5 yards a carry in 2021, and he was a pretty good receiver, a pretty good pass blocker. He obviously had the big drop against Illinois last year, but he would be kind of an ideal, third back, I think, and because he runs the ball, catches it pretty well, and like I said, he blocks. So we'll see how that kind of develops. But yeah, I'm wondering if we'll see, if that's maybe one room where we'll see some attrition. I think we could see a lot, this spring, probably almost at every position, honestly, with the way that the roster's, shaking out so far.
I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, there's just like so many mouths to feed, and there's a lot of players who ended up staying, which I was kind of surprised by, just because you don't see that a ton with a new coaching staff. And running back is a room where we could see some attrition, and there's no problem with that at all. I mean, there's just a lot of bodies. Same thing at the wide receiver position. There's just a lot of bodies, and I'd rather have a coach that over recruits a position than under recruits a position because we've seen the effect of under recruiting a position, and it has not been pretty.
So yeah, looking ahead to wide receiver, talking about guys that were kind of came back or able to stay on the staff. Xavier Betts, I think, is a big name there, and he's a guy that I definitely am watching. I wrote up 7 players I'm kind of watching this spring, and he's one of them because he's a guy that I feel like could really establish himself as a starter at a position where Nebraska kind of needs some help. A big guy who can run, could maybe fill some of that void left by Trey Palmer. I know Malachi Coleman's in the mix. I've read some different things, and I know we talked about that he didn't enroll early. I think he might have enrolled early, so I still need to get some clarification on that. I'm not 100% certain because 24/7 Sports doesn't have him listed as an early enrollee, but if you look at there's certain, interviews where or articles where it says that he is and that he's not. So I'm not 100% sure on that aspect of it, but I do think he's going to obviously whether he comes in the spring or in the summer, I think he's going to have an impact on the depth chart, but this is a big time for guys like Marcus Washington and Josh Fleeks, Billy Kemp, some of those transfers to kind of establish themselves in the depth chart.
And I love Billy Kemp as a slot receiver. He's a guy that can, obviously catch the football and run after the catch. Having a true slot receiver in an offense is crucial. I mean, it's often the quarterback safety valve. So, if Billy Kemp can really establish himself in spring and, kind of give the coaching staff a taste of what he could do in the fall, maybe, then I think that's certainly a win. And, you look at the wide receiver position and we've come a long way from having no depth and relying on Ken Wine Noah to be a impact player. Nothing against Noah, but I mean, there's just more depth and there's more playmakers and there's a whole lot of speed. So I'm excited to see that speed, play out on the field too. Because some of these 40 times, I mean, we talked with Bryce Turner and he's like, "Oh yeah, I ran this time," and like meantime, I'm like struggling to get off my chair. So I mean, there's a ton of speed right there, and there's a ton of speed in the room. So I'm excited to see how it plays out. And I'm excited to see their hands too, because you can have as much speed as you want, but if you can't catch the football, then it's kind of a moot point. So I'm excited to see the type of hands they have as things get going, and how they'll be able to translate to the college level.
Yeah, and it's we'll see how like I said, Xavier Betts, some of those guys,
Right.
Billy Kemp, I think is going to be a big
Right.
addition.
Mhm.
But yeah, and I want to see how they kind of build that relationship too, and that's an interesting thing to me with like with Casey's already got a really good relationship with Marcus Washington and some of those guys. So how do those quarterbacks kind of develop that rapport with these wide receivers? But Billy Kemp, I think, is a guy who's going to catch a lot of passes this year. Washington too, and then Betts and Coleman, and then we can shift over because talking about the tight end position, we're also going to have a lot of guys there, and this is a big spring, I think, for Thomas Fidone, Arik Gilbert. That's going to be an interesting battle to watch and to see how those guys kind of stack up on the depth chart. I think Fidone obviously is a guy who has the clear path to being the starter, but I think both guys are obviously going to see time, and tight ends a position where I think you're going to see a lot of guys see snaps next year in blocking roles. But definitely this is a huge spring to me for Thomas Fidone.
Honestly, this is a huge spring to me for, guys like AJ Rollins and James Carney because you kind of want to see where they fit. AJ Rollins had some good action and good catches in the spring game last year. Then he kind of, faded away. So I'm curious to see where they kind of fall on this depth chart because, you have Gilbert and Fedoni as the 1-2, however order you think it's going to go. They're going to be the 1-2, and I'm curious to see how not the bottom tier guys, but the 3 and the 4 kind of play out as well. And Fedoni is a guy that I really want to see, play at a high level starting the spring just to kind of get comfortable, get his feet under him after all the injuries, kind of get back into the football playing mindset of things. And it's interesting. He said that he was ready to play last year, and the coaching staff was asking, why he wasn't playing, and the training staff kind of told him to, sit it out, which I don't think is a bad thing because from my personal experience, I've been teammates with and worked with tight ends who have a ton of injuries, and they're only like 21 years old. At some point you got to think about life after football. But now that Fedoni is healthy, I'm curious to see, what he can do and what Gilbert can do too. I was watching some highlights of the Georgia spring game the other day, and he's just Gilbert's a monster in the red zone. He's an absolute beast. He can make catches. He's very athletic for a tight end. He's not this lumbering slow guy. He can run well after the catch. He can catch passes in tight windows. So I'm curious to see his impact on this team as well because I think he's a pretty good football player. And honestly, he probably is my favorite transfer that Nebraska has landed um, this offseason.
Yeah, I definitely. I mean, I definitely think he is a big transfer. A big addition. And he's a guy that has first round potential. I think both of those guys have first round potential. Nate Borkacher, he had some big moments last year, so we'll see what he can do. I mean, I think he's a former walk on, and Hickman, and I've said this a million times, but people are focused on the fullback, and we haven't heard a lot of talk about the fullback. That's because the tight end is basically the new fullback and the H back. So these guys, even if they're not, catching a ton of passes, Barkacher, and there's roles for them, if they're going to be a willing blocker in this running game, because Matt Rule, has said time and time again that he wants to, be physical and run the football and, be that type of program. And so they're going to need some of those guys to kind of step up into that blocking role. And I would like to see, Fedoni and Gilbert obviously be part of that too. And so we'll see kind of how their blocking holds up too, because if you can't block, it's going to make it harder to play you, on a full-time basis.
I think Gilbert can block pretty well. I'm not sure about Fedoni. We don't Fedoni's kind of a wild card in many aspects because we haven't really seen him play, at an extensive level yet. So, I think it'll be interesting to see what he does, and I think it'll be interesting to see the type of impact that Gilbert brings to the room because, I think he can be a very solid player, much like Fedoni. And Nebraska has done a much better job of getting the tight ends involved in the offense over the past couple seasons, and I look for that to continue with this group for sure.
And then, we'll wrap up our offensive spring preview here with the offensive line. And this is a huge position group to watch,
Yeah.
I think, because I'm interested with Ben Scott. Is he going to play center? To me, I think Ben Scott's the most important addition Nebraska's got in the transfer portal so far, at least on offense, because I do think that I've stuck with this. I do think Casey Thompson's going to be the starter at the end of the year. I think that Fedoni is going to be the number one tight end, just a little bit ahead of Gilbert right now. But I think that Ben Scott, it's not sexy, but this is a guy that's been kind of a 2-year starter. They need a center. And, I know he can play tackle too, but I feel like, I want to see him kind of lock down that role and see how some of these other guys come along. But, two of the big names I'm really keeping an eye on are Corcoran and Turner Corcoran and Bryce Benhart, because I feel like there's some other with some of the other guys that are coming back, Teddy, Nordine, some of these other guys that have come back from suspension and injury, and Scott, with Ben Scott, that's basically 3 starters. And, Ethan Piper kind of started last year. So which one of these guys is going to play guard and which one is going to play tackle? And, can Benhart, he started a lot of games at right tackle. Maybe it would just be okay to leave him there, but can, Donovan Raiola, can this coaching staff finally get him to start playing like a 4-star player? That's going to be a big question for me, because if not, and if those guys are struggling,
Mm.
then Nebraska's definitely going to have to find some offensive linemen in the spring transfer portal window.
Absolutely, and I don't care what position they play, and will this one play guard? Will this one do this? Blah blah blah. Will guys like Benhart and Corcoran actually play well? That's my big thing because they really struggled last season, quite honestly. And Corcoran was, like you mentioned, a former 4-star recruit, and Benhart was highly thought of as well. And they were just, I don't know, I hate to say it like this, but they were just awful last season. And they need to play better. They need to show that there's at least some sort of development. And not only, okay, they played a good 2-game stretch or they played a good 3-game stretch, more like they played a good second half of the season. And I'm not saying they need to be like the next like Andrew Whitworth out there playing at a high level for so long, but they need to play like play like solid linemen for the entirety of a season. And in that respect, I think this is a big year for Donovan Raiola as well. Because, I was kind of not surprised that they brought him back. It made sense to me, but if he has a bad year, there's no reason that Matt Rule should keep him. And we talked about this before, but I think it's a big year, or a big spring, not only for the line, but Raiola as well. Because I mean, if they start slow out of the gates this spring, then I'm not too enthused about the fall.
Yeah, we'll see. Some guys really need to develop, and that's going to be an important kind of point. Jacob Hood is a guy a lot of Nebraska fans have talked about as a former Georgia guy, and I've said a bunch of times like, hey, slow down. He was only at Georgia 1 year. He was a 4-star high school recruit, a 3-star transfer recruit. So I mean, not that those ratings matter all that much, but still, he's a guy that hopefully could provide some depth this year. Gunner, is it Gatula? Is that how you pronounce the
Yeah,
last name?
yeah,
Okay.
that's yeah.
He's coming in from Lincoln Southeast, 6'6", 285 tackle. Maybe he's a guy that could potentially, provide some depth because really they don't have a lot. And we saw that last year when Teddy got hurt. The offensive line depth really crumbled. And so hopefully some of those other guys can kind of, develop along those lines too. And we can feel better about this offensive line coming out of the spring because honestly, if you get good springs out of Corcoran and Ben Hart and even like Jacob Hood, then you're probably feeling a little better about your depth chart going into the fall.
Absolutely, and for the line, the work needs to start right now. Some positions, okay, quarterback, you can kind of coast. Running back, you kind of know what you're getting, but the offensive line needs to use as much practice time as they can, both in the spring and once fall camp begins, to kind of get situated and get their feet on room because they need to play at a high level if they want this offense to function. Quite frankly, because we saw Casey Thompson get hit way too many times. We saw the running backs struggled to find lanes just because there was nothing there. I mean, the defense was in Casey's lap within 5 seconds, and they really need to use all of their practice time in both sessions in order to develop.
Yeah, and I think we shouldn't discount, having Matt Rule and more offensive line,
Right.
minded coaches. But yeah, we do need to see this group take a step forward this spring. So we'll see if that happens, and we'll also be updating. We'll kind of go through and do a preview of the defense later this week on our Friday episode. We'll hopefully have a little bit of some nuggets and some information to
I
pass
can't
along
wait for
too.
those Nuggets.
And before we kind of wrap it up, though, we have a little bit of a recruiting information. Kind of a slow weekend for Nebraska recruiting. Nobody visited. Of course, we've got the big weekend coming up this weekend, March 25th. Bunch of guys going to be on campus, but there is going to be two guys on campus today. Danny wrote about Willis McGahee the fourth, the son of Willis McGahee, the former Miami Hurricane, Buffalo Bill, Baltimore Raven. He's an edge. He's going to be visiting today. And then another name, Cade Massey, 6'8", 255-pound offensive tackle out of the state of Kansas. So, the on-three prediction machine has Auburn leading for McGahee and the Jayhawks leading for Massey, but getting guys on campus that can certainly change that. So those are two visits to watch out for today.
I'll tell you what, McGahee makes me feel really old. Makes me feel really old. I remember watching his father as a Miami Hurricane and a Buffalo Bill, of course, being a New England fan. But the younger McGahee is a really good edge player. I like the fact that Nebraska is continuing to recruit edge players because I think it's such an important position. And then Massey, another big offensive lineman, and that's what this coaching staff's calling card is: recruiting and developing offensive linemen. So I'm excited to see what comes out of these visits. I don't expect anything like commitment wise or anything, but I'll be curious to see if we hear nuggets regarding what they thought. And I think it's really cool that they decided to come up for this practice just to kind of see what Nebraska is doing offensively and defensively. And I mean, there were no visitors this weekend because they're all coming. They're all coming on the 24th and 25th. So what is it? 26 guys coming?
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah, I believe that's what we're up to now. 26.
Oof.
Yep, 26 recruits. So,
Yeah.
it's gonna be a big weekend. Multiple 5 stars. Let's see, one, two, three, four,
They got the tight end
five.
Jaden Riddell coming. He was a new ad on Friday, so 4-star
Yeah,
tight end.
and yeah,
So
five guys that are ranked in the top 100 according to the on three prediction. Or I mean the on three industry rankings. So a lot of big guys on campus. So make sure you guys are checking out HuskerBigRed.com for all your updates over this weekend. We'll have a full recap next Monday of this huge visit weekend, and we will be back on Friday. We're going to check out. We're going to walk through the defense And we'll also have, some more position battles and stuff. We'll be updating you throughout the spring. So like I said at the start, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Go into the comment section, let us know what you think about the quarterbacks, receivers, tight ends, whatever, offensive line. We want to interact with you guys in this, Husker community that we're building. So hit that like button, get into the comments section, and make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any of our videos or upcoming podcasts. So as always, guys, spring ball has started. So, we're ready, and go
Yep.
Big Red.
Go Big Red.